The United States and Iran are preparing for high-level talks in Switzerland on Sunday, 3 days after signing a memorandum of understanding on ending the war. There's been uncertainty about the status of the talks after Iran announced earlier that it was closing the Strait of Hormuz because of Israeli violations of the ceasefire in Lebanon. Vice President JD Vance is on his way now to Switzerland and has said he's hopeful they'll make progress on the nuclear issue and on Lebanon. An Iranian delegation led by the Speaker of Parliament has arrived in Switzerland too. Tehran says it's sending its negotiating team to Switzerland to ensure the U.S. adheres to the commitments in the Memorandum of Understanding. High-level delegations from Pakistan and Qatar are also taking part as mediators. The U.S. Vice President says diplomatic efforts must continue to ensure the ceasefire in Lebanon is implemented by both Israel and Hezbollah.
Marco and the entire team have been actively managing what's going on in Lebanon. Despite the headlines, things are actually getting better there. Things have calmed down a little bit. It's going to be something we're just going to have to continuously manage to ensure that, Israel and Lebanon are both safe and secure. That's fundamentally the goal of this, is to make the whole region safe and secure. The big problem is that you have somebody will shoot and then somebody will respond, and you kind of have a chicken and egg problem where you've just got to stop the siege for long enough to get the ceasefire to hold. That's what we're going to try to do. We'll keep on working at it, but things have gotten better.
Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Roslyn Jordan in Washington, D.C. for us. Ross, so JD Vance on his way to Switzerland, sounding positive about the talks.
The vice president spoke very briefly to reporters who were traveling separately from him and his wife, the Second Lady Usha Vance, on their way to Switzerland for talks expected to begin later on Sunday with the Iranian delegation. The vice president said that he expects that the U.S. will focus not just on putting on limits on Iran's nuclear ambitions, but also dealing with the ongoing efforts to stabilize the ceasefire in Lebanon, as we just heard him say on the tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base. The vice president also said he expected the Iranians will bring their own priorities to the table and that he feels that there's going to be robust discussion. The vice president only said that he could only be there for a couple of days. He didn't specify why, but it is important to note that this would be the first of several engagements expected over the 60-day period that is covered by the Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed by the U.S. President Donald Trump in France last week.
Well, Ross, there was a great deal of uncertainty about whether these talks would go ahead after Iran's Revolutionary Guard announced that it had once again closed the Strait of Hormuz, saying that Israel's bombardment of southern Lebanon is a breach of the ceasefire. It's warned vessels not to approach the maritime passage, saying their security would be otherwise compromised. But the U.S. military disputed Iran's claims that it had closed the waterway, saying it is open, and that U.S. forces were monitoring the situation to ensure it remains that way. So, Roz, what have we heard from the Trump administration about the Strait of Hormuz following Iran's announcement that it was closed again?
Well, the U.S. President Donald Trump, who is at Camp David this weekend, did take to his social media platform Truth Social on Saturday and said that in response to reports that the Iranian government is contemplating imposing fees or tolls on commercial vessels that are transiting the Strait of Hormuz, despite the 60-day waiver period called for in the Memorandum of Understanding, the U.S. President said that there would be no charging by the Iranian government either during the 60-day ceasefire, as he put it, or after the 60-day period has expired, the period, of course, being at which there should be a final agreement between Iran and the U.S. ending the war that started on February 28th. Now, while the Memorandum of Understanding does not specify that the Iranians have the legal right to impose fees after the 60-day period, the Iranians certainly believe that they do have that right. But the U.S. president said if anyone's collecting any tolls after that period, it will be the U.S. government doing so from countries, especially those in the region, that have come to count on it to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and to allow safe passage of their commercial vessels.
Ross, thank you very much for that. That's Al Jazeera's Roslyn Jordan reporting there from Washington, D.C. And here now is Mohammed Val in Tehran with more on what the Iranian government has been saying about the upcoming talks in Switzerland.
They said their delegation that is going to Geneva or Switzerland is not going there to negotiate or to start those technical talks that will take 60 days for the final phase of this peace process between Iran and the United States. Instead, they're going there to drive home the idea that Iran is not going to move forward in the implementation of the memorandum of understanding unless the Israelis abide by the agreement. And the Americans are bearing the responsibility for that. The Americans have to guarantee that the Israelis comply. And that's the purpose of this visit. So it's not a visit for the intended negotiations or expected negotiations for the final agreement. And the Iranians also are taking other measures. They have announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And they said that they will continue to do that until the agreement is implemented. They are talking about the first article, which is a ceasefire in Lebanon, talking about 4 other articles, 2 of them related to the Strait of Hormuz itself and the American side of the implementation, and the other 2 are to do with the sanctions, the American sanctions, and also the unfreezing of Iranian assets abroad. So there is quite a lot of things the Iranians are doing and saying to make sure that now we are stuck at the first phase of this peace process, and that if the memorandum is not respected, particularly those 5 points, then there is no need. And there is no need for the 2 sides to go ahead.
Well, the success of the talks in Switzerland depends heavily on developments in Lebanon. Israel has been bombarding the south of Lebanon despite pressure from Washington to create space for diplomacy. Dozens of people have been killed in the past few days, taking the total number of Lebanese killed to more than 4,000 since March 2nd. Yet the Israeli military says it remains committed to the ceasefire agreement while acting against threats to its forces. Noor Odea reports from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank.
Israeli media is reporting that the Israeli Prime Minister and his Minister of Defense have instructed the army to stay put in occupied Lebanese territory, but to halt fire, excluding the battles that continue to rage in that hill near Nabatiyeh, where Israeli soldiers were killed and injured over the past 48 hours. The battles in that strategic location are reportedly scheduled to continue on track. But Israel considers this an implementation of the ceasefire and says that unless Hezbollah fires at its occupying forces, it will not be attacking Lebanon. The situation in Lebanon has threatened to derail upcoming talks in Switzerland, and that is what is at stake, really, the divergence of positions between the U.S. that wants to see this ceasefire with Iran hold, to see negotiations succeed and move on to a final deal. Israel, that views that memorandum of understanding as a political disaster, doesn't want to leave the occupied territory in Lebanon. In the middle of all of that are upcoming elections in Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister having to balance between trying to stay alive politically and to keep that strategic alliance that Israel cannot gamble away with the United States. That is what will judge and what will control the measures that Israel takes in the coming hours and days. Noor Odea, Al Jazeera, Ramallah, Palestine.
So talks now expected to begin on Sunday in Switzerland. Osama bin Javed is in Birkenstock with a look ahead to what we can expect when the talks take place. He's one of the very few journalists who was given access to the venue of the summit.
Strict security is in place here in Birkenstock, where possibly the most consequential meeting for the Middle East is about to take place. This place is owned by the Qatari government and has been previously home to a similar diplomatic meeting during the Ukraine war. I'm about to take you into the media center, where it is completely empty. There's very few media personnel who've been able to gain access. That is why this is such prime location for these meetings, because it is secluded and the entry to this place, it can be controlled quite effectively. This is the Iran-US 14 points that are going to be coming under discussion. What an extraordinary turn of events here on Saturday as the entire situation was about to fall apart. Then we saw the Pakistani Interior Minister making his way to Tehran, the Qatari Foreign Minister and Prime Minister here in Bergenstock. Both sides, the mediators who've been crucial in bringing these sides together, have been able to bring it closer one more time. The biggest sticking point remains the first point of the memorandum of understanding, which stipulates that both sides need to abide by the agreement and respect each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. That includes Lebanon, and that's where the Israeli attacks have continued, and that's why Iran has shut down the Strait of Hormuz. In terms of the delegates here, we know that Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, are both here. We're still waiting to get confirmation if JD Vance, the US Vice President, is going to be here. The Qatari Foreign Minister is already here, has been holding a number of important meetings. We're also hearing from the Pakistanis that they are also going to be arriving with high levels of engagement. And the Interior Minister is already part of this. We're hearing the Foreign Minister, who has actually traveled to Cairo for the Quad meeting between Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. This is where the meeting is going to take place. Again, this is the press center, which is completely empty. We're expecting that there's going to be more press personnel who are going to be here when the actual event takes place. But now the entire focus is not on the next phase of implementing the 14 points, but it's actually coming back. Commitment for commitment, implementation, not just a signing ceremony. So it is going to be extremely crucial for these sides to come together in the presence of the mediators and be able to make this a successful mediated effort so that there could be peace between Iran and the United States and by extension the wider Middle East. Osama bin Javed, Al Jazeera at the Bergenstock Resort in Switzerland.
Well, let's discuss these latest developments with Ambassador Richard Schmier now. He's the former U.S. Ambassador to Oman and Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. He's joining us from Delaware. Ambassador, good to have you with us again on Al Jazeera. So we now have confirmation that the U.S. Vice President is heading to Switzerland. The Iranians have also arrived, a high-level Pakistani delegation on its way. First of all, does it suggest that some progress may have already happened behind the scenes before the actual talks tomorrow, given the presence of all these folks?
Well, I certainly think that it's good news that all of the participants are continuing to make their way to Geneva, and that it is expected that tomorrow the negotiations will actually begin. And I think it was important that Vice President Vance, before leaving Washington, noted that obviously one of the critical issues that will be discussed tomorrow is the ceasefire in Lebanon. So I think that was an effort to provide some reassurance to the Iranians that we are working hard to ensure that that ceasefire takes hold, and I believe we can get there. So again, the fact that all the parties are heading there, the fact that no one is boycotting or is suggesting that this isn't going to work is very encouraging. And so I hope tomorrow we will see some real progress.
The Vice President did sound optimistic, but Ambassador, as you know, Israel could be the spoiler here, given its actions in Lebanon. The U.S. and Israel don't seem to be on the same page. Israel appears willing to risk friction with Trump yet again over Lebanon. Is Washington, you think, likely to take further steps to get Israel to actually cease fire in Lebanon?
Well, I think Washington, the U.S. military, the president are all focused on how to ensure that Israel doesn't take any actions in Lebanon that will trigger military response from Hezbollah. Apparently, what happened in the past 24 hours was the result of some redeployments. So I think that issue probably has been discussed. And so I think Israel understands the need to allow this ceasefire to take hold. And so I think it will happen that by tomorrow, when the discussions resume or begin in Geneva or in Switzerland, that we will have a ceasefire in place and that element will be behind us. But of course, it's something we'll have to keep our eye on.
Right. Another issue, a big one right now, is, of course, the status of the Strait of Hormuz. We are in very choppy waters there, to use a maritime metaphor. What are you expecting there? We've had the Iranians say that the strait is closed. CENTCOM has denied that. Do we expect any sort of action from the U.S. if Iran says the strait is closed and threatens once again this crucial waterway?
Well, of course, CENTCOM has reassured shippers that CENTCOM can provide security for commercial shipping. I think that has probably had some positive impact, but I'm certain that shippers are concerned about the Iranian threats and probably are reducing or delaying their shipments through the strait. I do think that essentially there's been silence from the White House on the Iranian announcement. I think that's actually a good sign because I think it means that there are discussions behind the scene. I don't think we'll see anything further today, but I do hope tomorrow when the sun comes up in Switzerland, we'll begin to see some evidence that Iran is standing down from that statement, as I believe we will be seeing a more successful ceasefire in Lebanon, and then neither side needs to issue threats or condemn the other side. We will simply, I think, be able to move on.
Right, but we have had this cryptic message, this cryptic post from President Trump earlier about the Strait of Hormuz and told there that he said the U.S. would possibly impose after 60 days or not if they were told. It was very mysterious, cryptic, this post. What do you think the president's intentions are when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, I think he was trying to make clear that while the MOU does specifically address the issue of tolls for the next 60 days, indicating there will be no tolls for the next 60 days, I think he was putting down a marker that after 60 days, no one should expect Iran to have the ability to impose tolls. Now, the fact that he suggested the U.S. might impose tolls, I think is not something that is really realistic that he really intends to do, but perhaps just a way of signaling that if there are going to be tolls, it's not going to be Iranian tolls. And I think that was basically his message.
Ambassador, very good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your insight. Ambassador Richard Schmier joining us on Al Jazeera from Delaware. Thank you very much.
Thank you.